Welcome to Tata's. No, I'm Alexa. Wait, it's been so long.
Tatas and tea.
Hi, I'm Alexa.
I'm Amanda.
Welcome to Tata's and Tea.
This is like a very chaotic time in my life. Like, I feel like a lot of crazy things happen. So crazy things are happening for you too.
In another way.
In another way.
Yeah, right.
So I just got back from a cruise and I was actually a little hesitant to go on this cruise because I went with this group of people that I met on a cruise a couple years ago. So 2 years ago, someone I know who worked on a cruise ship had invited me on this cruise, and I usually go by myself. And it was kind of a solo cruise. But when I was on this cruise, I saw a bunch of people wearing these like rainbow lanyards. And I was like, oh, that looks gay. And I'm gay. So like, what's the deal? And someone was like, oh, there's this, it's like a podcast or like a live talk show we listen to. And it's this lesbian and this gay guy. And they host these vacations. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then the lesbian host came over and introduced herself, and then next thing I know, she's handing me their itinerary for the week, and I'm like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, come join us, we have a bunch of stuff going on, here's some bingo cards. And I was like, oh, okay, this seems like a cult, sign me up. You know, I've always been curious. So throughout the week I went to their events, but the first event I went to was the meeting that they had to go over the itinerary for itinerary changes. And it was really weird because the lesbian was there with her wife, and in front of this whole group of people, she goes, we just picked up this really hot lesbian, Amanda.
And you were there.
And I was there at this meeting. And she was like, yeah, she's going to like join us. And like, she's really hot. And then she goes on to say something like, oh, if my wife weren't here. And I'm like, in front of her wife.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, this is awkward. Like, this is very uncomfortable.
Would have walked right out.
I was like, okay, this is uncomfy. But also I'm like, oh, whatever. You know, she's got like a big personality, whatever. And, you know, I didn't really think much of it because I was invited on this cruise by someone who I was like, I don't want to say like chasing after, but like my interests were elsewhere on this cruise. So my interests were elsewhere. So I didn't really think anything of it. And so over the course of the week, like, I would see the lesbian and see the lesbian's wife and a bunch of other people part of the group, and I'd just be myself and I'd be super friendly. And, you know, throughout the week, she would still make comments in front of me and to the group. I remember we went to karaoke and she was like, oh, wow, she's hot and she can sing. And so I left the cruise, and she lives kind of close to where we live, maybe an hour away. And at this point, too, I was really struggling. I was going through it. And so I was really looking for a community of people, like a gay community, because I didn't really have a lot of gay friends at this point in time. And I was like, this is perfect because I just met like these really cool like gay people. And so we exchanged numbers, and I was like, oh, we could go and karaoke. And I genuinely thought like I was making friends, and I was really excited about it. And then I came home and I listened to their talk show podcast. I don't really know what it's classified as, but I'm going to call it a talk show because it's like live every day. So I listened to their talk show, and they were talking about me on it. And I was like, wait a second, what? Okay. So basically the lesbian goes on the talk show and says how she had some sort of pact with her neighbors who were on the cruise. So she goes, yeah, like my neighbors and I had this pact to see who could have the most sex. And we picked up this hot lesbian, and she was all over me, and like my wife was super jealous, so because of that my wife and I ended up having a lot of sex. And I was like, whoa, is this play about me? Because in my mind I didn't do anything wrong. Like, I was just being friendly. I treated her the same way I treated her wife. I wasn't really trying to flirt with her. Maybe my friendliness came off as flirting, or maybe I did learn also on this cruise that a lot of the people who cruise with them, like their listeners, some of them are like a little obsessed with the hosts. So maybe she's just used to people being like obsessed with her, or like, I don't know, like fawning over her. But I wasn't trying to do that. She's married, and I was just trying to be friends. And so afterwards, when she talked about me like that, and she didn't say my name, right? But if you were on the cruise, you knew who she was
You
talking
knew,
about.
yeah.
You knew. So I think I had texted her and I apologized because I never want to put someone in a position where they're uncomfortable. So I made very clear I was not interested like that. And she was like, no, I know, ha ha ha. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I booked another cruise, right? Because I had met so many cool people on this cruise and I wanted to cruise with them again. So I booked another cruise. I go on the cruise, and before we even get on the ship, I run into the lesbian. And she's like, her wife is not there this time. And she says, yeah, my wife told me to stay away from this specific person. And I was like, is she talking about me again?
Oh my God.
Like, what is happening? But then I'm like, maybe I'm overthinking it. Like, no way could she be talking about me because I haven't done anything. So we go on the cruise, and there was a girl who I had befriended on the first cruise who I thought I was really good friends with. And her wife were there, and her wife ended up having, I like learned on the first cruise, her wife was obsessed with like the lesbian. And so the whole time, the lesbian and then this person I befriended and her wife kind of like stuck together as like a group of three. And it was almost like my friend and the wife were the lesbian's bodyguards, because anytime I would see her, they would kind of like usher her away from me. Almost, it was really weird, or like prevent us from not prevent us from talking, but they were just like her bodyguards, and it was so bizarre.
They're like making this lady like a celebrity,
right?
Like,
I mean, I met her on a cruise, so to me, she's just someone I met on a cruise that hosts a talk show. Honestly, like kind of like
yeah.
us.
Who's obsessed with us? Tell us now.
It was just so weird, and so I'm sitting here thinking, okay, this has got to be in my head. But then I get back from that cruise, okay, and the person I thought I was friends with unfriended me on Facebook. And I'm like, that's so weird. And she was being so weird to me. And so I get off the second cruise, and what do you know? The lesbian goes on and starts talking about me again.
Now I remember these recorded
Oh.
or the voice notes.
Well, I also
that you
have
sent me.
the recordings from the podcast episodes. So basically, she goes on to say, before I got on this cruise, and here's where I get a little, because when we do our podcast, right, we try to make people anonymous if it's going to be a bad look for them. Sometimes we'll change like small details. You know what I mean? We try to keep people anonymous as much as possible.
But the stories are legit.
But the stories are legit, right? And that's fine. So this person, the lesbian, gets on air and says, yeah, before going on this cruise, my wife told me to stay away from one person. And that was Big Titty Amanda. That was the nickname she coined for me. And I was like, what the heck? And because I'm like sitting here like, what did I do to this person to make her think I'm such a threat? Like, I truly have no interest. I've made that so abundantly clear. And she's like, yeah, you know, like, I was trying to stay out of trouble. And she was just like everywhere. And so the gay guy, the host, basically tells her, you know, if your wife is telling you to stay away from this person, like, I don't think it's this person that's the problem. I think you're the problem. You're the untrustworthy one. And here I am thinking, like, yeah, I'm not the problem.
Definitely. You haven't made moves on her. You don't flirt with her. Nothing.
No, I was just being not friendly. I treated her the same I treat everyone else. And it was just so wild to me that, like, she got on this podcast and not only talked about me, but also named me, and then went on to say that I did something I didn't do that was, like, way out of pocket, and was just a complete lie. So that's why I was hesitant to go on this one.
The other people who went on the cruise, are they like mostly couples or are they single?
There's like a good mix. Most of them are gay, some of them are straight, some of them are coupled, some are single. Like, it's a really big, healthy mix of people.
Are there a lot of single lesbians?
No.
So that's probably like, that's what I'm thinking. Like,
Yeah.
she had a crush on you.
Maybe not a thing for me, definitely an attraction. So I go on this cruise and I'm like, you know, I'm going to be so well behaved. I'm going to avoid her because, and after the second cruise, right, and this whole podcast thing came out, I did text her again and I was like, hey, I just want to make it abundantly clear. I have no interest in you. I basically said it this way. I was like, I'm not interested in you. You're married. Even if you weren't married, like, you're not my type. Like, she's more mask. I'm into femmes. Like, and also the wild thing is, on the first cruise where she picked, like, I keep saying she picked me up, but like, that's kind of what they did. They adopted me into the group. On the first cruise, I was literally interested in someone else on that cruise. And she knew I was interested. The whole ship basically knew I was
Mhm.
interested in this other person. And she gave me so much shit on that cruise for like being interested in this other person. And then she's going to be like, yeah, this person was like into me.
Mm-mm.
That's why it's so
No, I
wild.
remember that whole time period too, because we were friends then.
Yeah.
Like I remember the whole thing, and you were not into the to
No.
the host or whatever.
No, definitely
It was
not.
definitely the other
Definitely
person
the other person,
who
which
wasn't even part of that group.
no.
Right.
So I was like nervous to go on this cruise, but I was like, you know what? It's fine. You know, I kind of was like, if something happens again with this person and it's like bad and toxic, I'm just gonna like not do this anymore. Like this will
Yeah.
just be my sign to not go on cruises with this group. So I go on the cruise and I'm well behaved with this person. And here I am thinking, what could she possibly have to say
Oh
bad about
God.
me? And so she gets on the show after the cruise because I know they're going to talk about the cruise and I know I'm going to get mentioned. And she goes on there and she tells this whole story about how before I got on the cruise, my neighbor told me to stay away from this one specific person and
Now
goes
the
on. The
neighbor. Now
neighbor.
the neighbor.
Now the neighbor. She's like, yeah, my neighbor told me to stay away from this one specific person. And I told him like and she's like, I have no interest in this person. You don't have to worry about me. Like I have no interest in this person. But once again, she's telling the story about how people are warning her to stay away from me. And here's the kicker. She does it for the bit. And, here's the thing. I get it. I get doing things for the bit and for the entertainment. But you're talking about real people here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a real person. You're naming me, especially after the second cruise. You're naming me and telling these stories that are not even true, that make me look really, really bad. And I will be the first person to own up to the bad behaviors that, I have. Like, I would be the first person to tell you, yeah, that happened. But, like, she's just, like, making all this stuff up about me for the bit. And I'm like, girl, why are you so obsessed with
Right?
me?
Seriously. Does she talk about any other people like that on her show? Like from the cruise, like make stuff up that is like not true? Or is it
I don't
just
know.
you?
I think people have told me that she does say things. They talk about a lot of their listeners,
Mhm.
and they'll talk about things that happen on cruises, but I can't say if, like, the things that they talk about are things that actually happen.
Because you weren't like
Because I was
there.
Yeah. And I did have someone on this last cruise come up to me and say, because we were talking about the last cruise I went on with them. And I was like, yeah, I was really upset with how she talked about me on air. And one of the people I met was like, yeah, I was really upset with how she talks about you. Because he was like, I know you. And he
Mhm.
was like, I was there. And you were not like that at all. And I was like, thank you. Because, like,
Mhm.
I'm like, is it me? Am I the
Yeah,
problem?
right.
So,
There's like a disconnect.
yeah. And I'm like, what is going on?
And it's all for her to get more freaking
Yeah.
listeners.
It's all
Like
for the bit.
right. Like come on.
But you know what? She did go on to say that I was actually a very lovely person. I was no drama
You were
or anything.
kind.
I was kind and
yeah.
I was a kind and caring person on this cruise. And I'm glad I got that review. And I hope that, moving forward, maybe she'll listen to this podcast. Probably not. But I hope moving forward, if she does listen, that is who I am as a person. And that is what the person I was on this cruise, I feel like really embodies the person I am. And the last two cruises, this is when I was really, really going through it, like mentally with,
Mhm.
like I was really in a bad spot. I was like on and off again with like a really toxic abusive relationship. So I was like really already going through it. And then to like just make stuff up about someone.
Just like adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah. And it's not necessary. But like also it's kind of flattering. Like, why are you so obsessed with me,
Right.
girl?
Well, we have to see what happens on your next cruise.
Oh my God, yeah, because I
That
booked
you
another one
booked.
for March. Sometimes people are just a little delulu and they like think they have a chance when they don't.
That reminds me of this girl I dated was extremely obsessed with me, and we only went on like a few dates. Like I wouldn't even consider her like an ex or dating. She actually would come to like my job unannounced, like not, oh hey, I'm gonna stop by today. Like she like stalked me all the time. The one time she like bamboozled me and was like, oh, like, but I had softball that night. And she's like, oh, before the game, stop by this bar. You know, I'm going to be in the area. I'm like, really? I'm like, well, I'm not going to go and drink or anything. Like, I'm not hungry. I'm like, I could stop by and just see, like, you know, for a minute since it's so close. I go there and her whole entire family's there. Like, everyone in her family, including like little kids and stuff. I think it was like, I think like somebody in her family, I don't know if they passed away or something, and like it was like the repast or something, but she didn't tell me.
Oh my God.
And I walked in and everyone was so excited to meet me. I didn't even know anything about any of these people. It was the most awkward thing ever.
And you had only gone on a couple dates.
Like, I think one or two.
So what happened after that? Did you keep seeing
I think
her?
no, definitely not.
Oh, okay.
Definitely not. I was just done. I was like, yeah, this is like crazy behavior. And like we went to like one like it was like a Mexican restaurant like up north, like after she wanted to walk at the waterfront, like where you could see the city, and she's like, "Oh, I really want to live in the city one day, blah blah blah." I'm like, I have no desire at all to even go to the city. Never mind live there. Like, I hate going. And she's like, "What?" She's like, "We have to live there." I'm like, "Absolutely not." And it was just so weird. Like, she was just like obsessed with like me, but like didn't even know me.
The idea of you.
Yeah, like it was so strange, and like she was like very like possessive. It was weird. And then the one time she came to watch me bowl when I was like in a bowling league. Like, I think I told her, "Oh, I had bowling," and she insisted on coming.
She definitely had a different idea of like where you guys were versus like where you thought.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, it's like so funny when you think about it, right? Because like I'm sure we've been delusional before too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
I've definitely been delusional before. But it's so crazy when you think about like the other way around, and like it's kind of scary too sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's scary.
It was scary behavior, and like people at work were like, "What is going on?" Because like they knew everything. Like we were like really close, and I'm like, I don't know why she's coming here, and I don't know why she's saying like she was like in love with me, and like we just met and went on
Wild.
one date. Like, I don't even know if we kissed. I don't remember that.
Damn, you must
So
have
I
been
doubt
magic.
it. I don't think anything happened. It was just weird. Like, to be so obsessed with somebody and you don't even know them. Like, only going on a couple dates.
Yeah.
And like just like the person that you're talking about, you went on 2 cruises, and like they have one, or you know, they
Yeah.
have this idea like of you.
Yeah, I guess it's just like it's weird how people also portray things. Like, she, like this girl, right? Obviously portrayed to her family like you guys were like this much bigger deal than you were,
Mm-hmm.
and like got you to meet her entire family, and they had obviously known about you because they were so excited to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I mean, I guess the one thing is you'll never know what she said to her family. I know what the lesbian said to her,
Like the
all of her
right,
listeners,
because you could listen to it.
like, yeah, which
Right.
is a benefit, right?
Right.
Because at least I can mentally prepare. Although sometimes I'm like, maybe I shouldn't listen. Like, maybe it's better not to listen. But if I hadn't listened, I would not have known to like keep my distance on the,
Mhm.
and it's not because like I thought I was doing anything wrong. And if I was doing anything wrong, I asked her, and she was like, no. You're like, we had a whole conversation.
Yeah.
She was like, no, you're fine. So it's like, for the bit, I don't know. I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what she told her whole family, because they knew who I was. I've never even seen a picture of any of her family members or whatever. And I walked in and I thought she was just there like with a friend or something. Like, it just seemed like she was in the area, and it was definitely after like a funeral
That's
like
crazy.
that they all were at. And it was everyone. And then I felt uncomfortable because what do I do? Just walk out? And I'm like, then I'm going to look like a jerk.
Right.
So I just stayed and like talked to the family and like, you know, just had conversation. And then the little kids were like all over me. And I'm like, this is really uncomfortable, because like they're going to be like, oh, this is who she's dating now, or like this is who she's with. And it's not.
You have the wildest dating stories.
That was weird. Yeah.
like, you have like some like, I don't even have to date people to have wild stories, because I didn't even like, just weird things happen.
Yeah,
to
right.
me. Like,
Seriously.
I guess the moral of the story is you never know what people think of you. In your case, you didn't know what she was thinking, but you had all these thoughts, and she was having all these conversations with her family.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys were definitely on different pages. And in my situation, things were just kind of blown out of proportion for the entertainment value.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, like, I do understand, but also you're talking about real people.
Mm-hmm.
And we do this for entertainment, right? Like, we talk about our lives to entertain,
Mm-hmm.
but we're truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like we do this more so because we're just normal people living our normal, boring, sometimes exciting, sometimes traumatic lives. And so many people, I feel like, can relate to the things we talk about as other just normal people.
Right.
And like, I like listening to like podcasts from normal people that are just like me.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the things we talk about too, like, people talk about, but you don't really hear, like, we talk about coming out, or we talk about abusive relationships, and you don't realize how common these issues are, with the people in your everyday life.
And you don't even, like, even when we were like, oh, we're going to do certain topics, I'm like, I have nothing to say. And then I'm like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this actually has happened. And I just never really, like, thought about it, or like
Right.
thought that was what it was back then. But thinking about it now, that's exactly what it was.
Right. Talking about things like
Mm-hmm.
puts things into perspective for us and for people that are. I've gotten so many messages on Instagram of people just being like, oh my God. Like, first of all, it's like my friends being like, oh my God, I remember this story.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it's like, wow, it's really refreshing to listen to you guys just talk about things that people aren't saying
Mm-hmm.
out loud. Or, it's nice. It feels like I'm listening to my friends talk.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, it's the vibe.
Yeah, pretty much.
But at least we are truthful, and we don't exaggerate things
Right.
for the bit, because I don't believe in that. If
No.
we're going to tell a story, it's going to be as truthful as it can be without giving too much away.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I'll never try and make someone look worse than they are, and if they look bad, it's because
of their own actions.
exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. So if you like what you hear, follow us on Instagram or TikTok, and listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts
And YouTube
and YouTube.
at Tatas and Tea Pod. Listen up, fans, we're Tatas and Tea, where we turn our traumas into comedy. But we're here for some fun, to retell our life tales, from hilarious dates to epic fails. You want some advice, just ask away, but we'll share our opinions either way. No problems too big, no questions too small. With Tatas and Tea, we'll cover it all.